Okay. All right. Happy Friday. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Facebook fam, GG Village. Hello. How are you? This is really exciting. I guess different time for us here. First time we are coming together and talking about a very intimate issue, but I think a topic that really should be talked about more because it is a real thing for women, right?
Yeah.
And being that Generosity Global is actually uplifting women, and we are doing that through our Women's Health and Hygiene program, teaching them about their reproductive health, providing the education that they need to improve their hygiene and their health, and training them on how to make usable pads. So, with the global impact that Generosity Global is making, I think that this is a opportunity and a very great time for us to talk about what does this mean. There is purpose behind it. Period. So we're gonna have fun today. Talk a little bit about what our experiences were, right, team? Like, how was it for us to share this experience from a man's perspective and a female's perspective, and to our audience who is chiming in, hearing us right now. Feel free to also ask questions or maybe share stories or experiences so that we can all be a part of this conversation.
Yes. So for everybody who was watching, welcome to There Is Purpose in It, period, or There Is Purpose Behind It, period. If you are watching and you want to leave a comment, make sure you're watching on the Generosity Global page, Facebook page. That way we can see your comment populate on the screen. We can interact with you. We can see everything you post, but let it be an engaging conversation. We have some experts here, the females, and
yes, we are amateurs.
We are amateurs here, so we really don't have expertise in this domain. However, one thing we say is our goal with this, especially the t-shirts and this whole movement, is to really get men engaged in conversations. Let it not be something that is foreign and taboo, where we don't truly understand. Because the reality is, some of us men still need education when it comes to understanding what purpose is behind a woman's spirit. And I know two of my brothers who are here, do have daughters, and so I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I guess we'll be just go around the table and just introduce ourselves.
Yeah, how about we introduce ourselves and just get it all out? How did you first learn? Like, where did you first learn about what a period is for a woman? And we'll start with Brandy. the guy's like, let's warm up a little bit. So we'll start with Brandy and just go around the table.
Cool. All right. Well, my name is Brandy, and honestly, like, I mean, Rich was talking about like it being taboo for the guys and like not having, but I mean, I don't know, like it was pretty foreign for me. Like my mom didn't talk about it with me. My sister is 8 years older than me, so by the time I had it, like she was already out of the house, and like I couldn't really go to her for help. So like it was my friends and their moms, or like, if I just happened to have it at school, and it was like, so it was the school nurse that helped me, like educate me, gave me like a pamphlet, and so from there, I mean, I know like that's why I'm here, because I want to be able to, talk about this and make sure that there are, anybody at any age, they can start talking about this and, get the narrative out. So.
Wow.
I love it.
Awesome.
Sure. My name is Jenny. Very similar to Brandy. It was not something. I grew up in a very old school conservative household, so it was not something that you discussed, even with my mom. So definitely not with that. Definitely not. So I grew up in like 1952. Leave it to beaver house. So, so yeah, it was mostly girls talked about it. In middle school, it was just kind of one of those like, oh, so and so got it. You know what I mean? And it was a very hushed. You did have some, talk about it in school. So there was the offer of like the education through health classes, but that was also very awkward. I think it was awkward for the teachers. So then they had difficulty making it not awkward for the kids. And then you're talking about kids who are very immature and, the girls included. So it was awkward for everybody. So there wasn't, it's weird. It was kind of like, let's get through this subject and move on. So it's not like anybody really learned anything or like, you certainly did not ask questions. So yeah, it was, it could be hard, even for us as a girl. And I know probably the biggest thing that stuck out in my mind, and again, coming from a very conservative household, I taught swimming lessons when I was a kid, and not trying not to show my age here, but tampons were still like kind of like a weird thing back then. Like it was the kind of the scare, like when they first came out with like TSS, and I know you guys know what that is, but my mom like
No, seriously, what is TSS?
Oh, it's toxic shock syndrome.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I have had that.
Really?
Yes, a
Wow.
tampon got stuck.
Stop.
Wow.
My first time trying.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
You're actually. I think it was one of those things.
This is gonna be
Mom,
Yeah.
Which is like,
When you talk about the swimming pool, like,
but my mom, because scare of the TSS was not allowed. So I can in some ways relate to, subject matter we'll get down to in the road, down the road when you talk about kind of the shame and things like that, because my mom wouldn't allow me as a teenager to use them. So during that week in the summer when I was teaching swimming lessons, I was the one girl who taught lessons on the side of the pool with her shorts on. You know what I mean? Like bathing suit, but then your shorts. So it was very clear why I wasn't in the pool for a week. Wow. And that's terrible.
Wow.
So
was it for religious reasons? Because sometimes
no, it was just
people like the
lack of education, and I think it was, it was so fairly new at that point, and TSS stuff, and then I also, there was just like a lot of lack of comfort in general. I had issues with my period, and one of the things that doctors will suggest is that a girl go on the pill to assist with whole periods, and that was absolutely not going to happen. I will say now as a mom, Olivia, if you're watching, I'm really sorry to share this right now. This is probably not, but the same thing was suggested to her, and I don't consider myself anything like my mother, but that was very difficult to like be having this conversation about, you know what I mean, my 15, 16-year-old going on the pill, like, they're your baby. So as a mom, then you kind of understand a little bit better than you did as a kid. So I don't know. There's a lot with female. It's rough. Anyway, now you're up. Aren't you glad to follow?
Anyway, my name is Stanislaus. My friends call me the Lion. My experience with this was really limited. Coming from a third world country, and this being something that is not talked about in our households. Like, being a guy, I literally knew little or nothing about this. But my experience with this was in primary school. One of the girls who pretty much matured early had a period. She didn't know. And so when it was break time, when we take a break during, and then she got up, and then we saw she had blood on the uniform. And then how it is. Everybody was laughing. It was just like, looking back at it now, I really feel bad. It was like bullying. Then the guys just make a chit chat about it and just she just retrenched, and I think she could be depressed at that time. But looking back, we didn't even really know how that affected her. But that was the first experience that we talking, the people that knew about it, they started talking about it, and then I think our teacher got to know, and they started kind of giving us a little bit of education about that. But my knowledge about this really expanded only when I went to secondary school and then started doing human biology and all that stuff that I a little bit more about it. But from where we come from, this is really not something that you discuss with your parents.
Right.
Even the female child and the mothers had least to talk about it. I felt like they just learn this stuff by accident most of the times, or with their friends, and just by experience at that time, or they didn't take it back to their parents after it happened, and then they get a little bit of education at that time that this is what you're supposed to do. It's like that. Yeah.
Or baby comes.
Or baby comes.
And that's what
Exactly.
they learn.
Yeah. Or baby comes,
Yeah.
and boom.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so my name is Olubushilai Fashegumu, and some of it, you as a child, you see the when it happens to a young girl, a young woman, and it's the ridicule, it's the jokes, because no one ever talks about it. Right? So it was for me growing up, there were 7 of us. I have 4 older brothers and 2 older sisters, but my mom and my dad, my sisters, like they never spoke about what it was like for them to go through their cycles. So I didn't know anything about menstrual cycle. I don't even remember the first time I heard the word period or menstrual cycle, right? And then a child came one day. That was around 2 years ago. But now I can say actually through so I have 4 daughters, and their mothers, they have different mothers. One has one. Anyway, they do a great job in kind of communicating them around proper care, making sure they have all of their supplies. I have a 15-year-old, and I remember when she came on, and she came to me, and me being my father's son, I said, "Why are you talking to me about this? Right? Why are you talking about? Go talk to mother. Go talk to America. We're not supposed to have this conversation, right?" But luckily, I have a relationship with them that's so deep. They will always invite me into that space, And so now it's a little easier for me saying, "If you have what you need, I'm not going to go buy it, but you have it." If you don't have it, I can ask one of my mothers to go get it. But at least I can ask you if you have it, right? And so I haven't gone purchased any of the necessity. If it was higher situation, I'd run to see. Put my mask on. But yeah, it's I grew up in one of those houses. We just didn't talk about it. And I told my daughter, I said, "You can't talk to me about this. You have other people to talk to." But I'm a little more open to having those conversations and being their support system when necessary. But I do expect their mothers to kind of deal with it. As ridiculous, or as chauvinistic as that may sound, that's my reality. So
that's good. Well, I'm Erica, and my first mention of a period really connects to embarrassment. I got my period during my ballet concert, and it ruined the costume that I rented. So it was.
Well, you rented the costume.
Yeah, you are in dance class.
Right.
I was
so
a
you had to pay
ballerina.
somebody.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
wow.
was crazy. I'm a ballerina. I was a ballerina, and I was 13 years old. Went on stage, did my thing, came off, and it was there. It was all there. And before that happened, I would say that the conversation was very high level at my house. So it wasn't that it didn't come up, but it was high level, and this is something that can happen, but I don't think I was prepared for the emotional that happened with it. When it comes on, especially your first time, and you're not prepared, and then it's coming on in front of a whole audience of people. So, I think it's dealing with the emotional side and then understanding why is this? Like, what is going on with my body? It really comes on at such a young age because long time ago, women really started having kids at 16, 17, and 18. So our bodies were, menstruating because basically it was like saying, okay, now time to go.
You're ready.
You're ready. But that conversation was not had in my house because, of course, for you to even think or even have some type of knowledge around, because my mom was very conservative in terms of just talking about sex. That wasn't really something we discussed. It was more so this is a health thing, and that's all you need to know. But I think that now as I progress and move forward, and just looking back on my experiences, although I don't have daughters, I think that it is necessary for us just to be open and honest. Because what I'm learning is that just because we're telling somebody your body is ready to do this isn't necessarily mean we're pushing them. But into having that, I think sometimes my mom was like, oh, if I say too much, then she's gonna go out and have this baby or have this type of. But I think it's more so like, no, like this is something that goes down, and as long as you understand it, I think the more education behind it and knowledge makes it less and less of a bad thing that happens. Yeah. So I think just this helps with not making it seem like it's so bad or so shameful or so embarrassing as it was for me at the age of 13.
So my name is Rich, by the way, everyone. Thanks for tuning in tonight. And again, if you're watching and you want us to be part of the conversation, make sure you hop on the Generosity Global page and watch from there. If you're watching my personal page, just go over. To be honest with you, like I can't even clearly remember when I first was introduced to period that I can vividly remember. For me, it was either in some kind of health science class in high school, which is, I mean, literally I'm at this age, probably 15, 16. Nothing that I can pinpoint and said this was I didn't have the luxury of growing up with a sister, or I had female cousins, but they never talked about it. Never really knew like what it is exactly, right? And to be frank, like this is the first time I'm actually having this conversation with more than my wife in a setting as such where like we are actually opening up and talking about a period and talk like. So for me, this is actually more like to learn more as I try to learn every day. Right. It's to learn as much as I can learn. I always make a running joke. The only time I really knew that, a period is when the period didn't show up, a child showed up. I was like, so the 3 times she missed her period, 3 kids showed up, right? But no, overall though, I think this conversation is so necessary. I'm learning, even here in America and in a developed country, women still shun that.
Yeah.
Right. And so as we make this connection to the girl out in Kenya and Cameroon, it's probably 10 times worse because this is not even talked about. this is not a topic that, I still see like if in this space,
Mhm.
this is not something that we talk about in America,
No.
Yeah, it's very
right? So it's like uncomfortable in a sense, right? But I believe that there's a space of, I can speak for me, a desire to learn perspectives,
yeah.
So that's what I would say. Like
Mhm.
I'm fortunate. I ain't got daughters. I have. I got.
You have nieces.
Well, I got nieces, but their parents got. They're not coming to me
Right.
for that
Yeah,
ever,
yeah.
right? But if push come to shove, and I'm asked to, play a role, I'm sure. I never had a problem going to buy stuff, right?
No, you
Picked up the wrong
honestly,
sizes
that's what
sometimes.
I was actually. God bless. So one time, right? I said, "Babe, I'm running low," and you came home with like the Depends. You remember that?
Boy, when I got
It was
this,
like
Protected.
big diapers or whatever.
anything to catch it.
But the funny thing was, Rich is like, when my period comes on for him, it's happiness. Oh, you're not pregnant.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, and it's coming. I know, but it's coming on next month. So it's like a
Like clockwork,
celebration.
right?
Yeah. But no, actually, I was gonna say that. I think that it's very interesting that because so when we were as we were building generation women and thinking of how to make this program better, it always comes to mind like, is this just a cultural thing? Like, are we stepping into territories and we may offend the culture with it? I think about that a lot. We think about that. How do we tread in this space where we don't want to be offensive? Because again, every culture is different, right?
Right.
But what just hit me now, and you said it, is that I don't think it is
I
cultural.
don't think it's cultural.
I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel there might be some cultural differences, however,
Okay.
but I believe that the approach is, first of all, if you go to the environment, just get a general consensus of how that is being handled. And then if we know, then we can approach. But I believe this is not really, there's a not really cultural difference. I was actually struck when they told me this was an issue to their own homes, from a very developed country like America. And then, because we didn't talk about it, but we just thought maybe sometimes, our parents, maybe education barrier, things like that, but the reasons that were limiting. But I think there is an issue with shame and the discomfort of talking about sexuality or sex with our kids when they are young. And it almost seems like we are giving them too much information that will more likely expose them to try things or try go have sex or things like that. Because by the time you start telling them, okay, when you say have the menstrual cycle, this means that you can be pregnant if you get into an intercourse on a protected sex with blah blah blah. And then now that curious age, like I think that's I feel like maybe that's the reason why we have the barrier. But I would think that we will approach this because, especially as a guy, we probably hardly do not get involved. I think, like you said, this is the first time that I'm engaging in a conversation like this that guys are actually being involved. Most of the times when it comes to menstrual cycle period, it will be involved with just women. Men as well to be educated about this as much as possible, either because they have sisters, cousins, and so, or because they are going to be parents as well, and this education within guys also help to sensitize. And my brother here, Steve, doesn't feel like he needs to get that bad, but we need to get to a comfortable level where we can actually be able to feel comfortable to go purchase it. You see what I'm saying? So I think that was
If there's an emergency,
it's
gonna go.
No, not an issue of an
He's gonna put
emergency,
his mask on.
but being comfortable to not limit it to an emergency, being comfortable enough for us to it's okay to walk down the aisle and look for a tampon or
And
whatever.
it is okay.
That's what I'm
Perfectly.
saying. It is
But
okay.
it is.
No, culturally for me,
Right. It's
I
If
going
it makes
there.
you feel any
Yeah.
better, we don't like standing in line, and they're for us.
Bingo.
If there's somebody behind you, you you hide that stuff.
Thank you,
Like
Jenny.
here's
I was
the milk,
actually
here's the
gonna-
boxes
yeah.
of cereal,
Yeah.
and you're hiding that in
My
there.
wife is
You will not go and just buy those.
My
You know
wife
what
is-
I mean?
I never
I
thought
was
of it.
going to
Never
say
thought of it.
that.
So Sophie just commented. She says she doesn't believe it's cultural, but more so the lack of education and understanding it to better handle it with proper resources.
So
True.
true. Yeah.
And it starts with education, right? Like, for us, for me, we'll eventually get to you made the switch from tampons
Yes,
and all
'cause now
that.
you don't-
Honestly,
now you
I did
don't-
not know the difference between a tampon and a tampon. I
Yeah.
just
Clearly,
had it
you
as a
keep
tampon.
it depends.
Right. And I'm like, one is a stick, one.
They had to give me the old pack to
Yes.
take with me.
Yeah.
That was my
Yeah.
child's, bro.
Which
So I
takes
took
the
that
I
one.
take a camera, I take a picture like this one.
Wow.
Because after the first mistake or the first error that I made and I
Yeah.
brought the wrong thing, I'm like, it's not gonna happen again.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, I think I rush more because sometimes you get some pain. I'm like, oh, I was in pain,
Yeah.
So it's like that. But education, and I think for the men, it's like we just hurt, in a sense for men to just become more educated.
Yeah.
My wife was telling. So we have an 11-year-old son,
Mhm.
and she was just telling him, because he's in the house with, 3 girls,
Mhm.
right? Well, 4, including her. Oh, she's a woman, obviously. But of the 4 women that are in the house, 3 of them have their cycle, right? So,
Wow.
and
Every house.
it is, right? So
Is it around the
probably
same
why I
time?
have
Yeah.
Around the same time.
they end up
Because
all at the same
sometimes
time.
women
They sync,
we're
yeah, they
all
sync.
together.
They're in sync.
Yeah, we're
And, but she was telling him recently, she was like, listen, if this ever happens, if you ever see a young lady
That's good.
and you see that she has had her period and she didn't know, I need you not ridicule her. Go up to her,
That's good.
hand her a sweater, give her,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
to make
That's
her feel
sweet, yeah.
okay. And I was shocked that she actually had that conversation.
That's
But it was a welcomed dialogue between a son and his mother.
Mhm.
That
That is
those are the types of conversations we have to
Yep.
start having.
Absolutely.
with
and that's
our
what we
boys.
did not have.
Yeah,
And
right,
so
we didn't have
when
those.
when we saw them, we ridiculed them
Right.
by laughing or just making jokes or do all kinds of stupid stuff when we're growing up, which is really because we did not know any better.
So what age do you think is appropriate to start this with sons or daughters?
Well, I'll say for
Mhm.
again, I've never had the conversation this with my daughters, but we would talk about. I knew when it was coming again. They would always come to me for whatever reason, explain to me that, hey, Bob, this is going on. I'm like, okay. I do believe it's necessary because hormones are hormones, and when as humans, we can't dictate when the body is ready.
Right.
As women, when the body is ready to conceive, or as boys when they're in a position where they can begin to create. So it has to be before then, and it can't. But I absolutely agree that the reason we don't talk about it is that fear of, if I have this conversation, it leads into a bigger conversation that I don't want to have.
Yeah.
So I can't talk. I don't want to talk about it, right? But if you don't talk about it, I was my first child was conceived. I was 17, right? No one had a conversation with me about it, right? And I was in a house full of men, we just never talked about it. So in the young lady that I was with, I'm assuming no one talked to her about it, right? So we have to begin having these conversations at a much earlier age. If our children can pick up a tablet or pick up these devices and they can actually maneuver through these things with ease and have this high level of understanding and intellect, well, then we should be able to have these conversations with them at a much earlier age.
So
Hey, how do you feel? What age do you think is appropriate?
I mean, I'm completely in line with that because I just think the more like you're aware and know, I think then you're more prepared, you know? So like I don't have any kids, but like I would just like, I would think that if I was telling like a child, like, hey, this could happen, you know, or this like will happen, you know, at the time, you know, if I'm not careful or, you know, understanding of it. I just think that it is impactful to have that, you know, because the more you know, yeah, like I think there's that fear, that curiosity, and just like, okay, well, let's see what happens. But I think when you have that dialogue and you create a safe space, like so they can come to you and feel like comfortable in that, I think that's so important to have. And I think a lot of like, I know I didn't have that space, so I would have loved to been able to talk about that and not feel like weird and awkward and like, you know, so no, I think like definitely before they can even like because I like they pick up tablets at a young age. I'm sure that there's some way that they could make it for them to understand in a simple, and it doesn't have to be so big, you know, it just can be very simple. And you know, to be able to create that space, I think is the most important piece.
Jenny, what you mentioned, like you grew up in this very, you know, talking about it, Cleveland's right. At what age, if at all, did you ever become comfortable talking about it with your mom or, you know, parent?
Or even your
Never.
own daughter, dude?
Never
Well,
comfort.
I'm talking like just for her, when
okay.
if she ever.
Never comfortable with my mom.
Why was that?
That was because it was something that was comfortable for her. And I do know, you know, the more I think about, or, you know, listening to everybody else, hearing you ask that question of like, when is appropriate? I honestly think that for those of us who are open enough, every generation maybe gets a little bit better. It's unfortunate to think that maybe like it would take that long. Better than my mother was. My mother, I'm not sure. She's probably the same as her mom was. You know, I'm not really sure. You know what I mean? Like I'm a little bit better. I think Olivia will be miles better than I was. It was still something, even the level of what you recognize was not okay or not comfortable, or what you would have wanted for yourself is like only so many steps, right? And so I don't think that I probably was the best for Olivia. I think Olivia for her children would be better than I was even for her. If that makes any sense. So I think I'm not really sure, you know, even that question of like, when do you have the talk? I think hopefully for most families there is like, you get going. If you start the conversation, then it gets a little bit better as time goes, and the comfort level grows a little bit more with people. So
Do you think it's taboo for the most part in areas where there is a male dominant cultural, right? So in areas where there could potentially be the woman is more kind of dominant, it may not be as much of a taboo conversation. But in male dominated, I don't know.
Actually,
I don't know, right? But I know that there's some on the continent where women can have multiple husbands, right? So there's cultures there where women can have multiple based on their religious practice, or whatever spiritual practice. So I was just wondering, like, so what the West is very male dominated, right? Certain religions, right, have created these cultures, but they are very male dominated. So if you are suppressing the pure being of someone, then her natural order and how she exists is also suppressed. So I wonder
because you guys are kind of controlling that narrative.
Men control the narrative.
And if we don't want to go to the store and buy anything,
I don't have to go to the store. But I wonder if,
well, and I think it goes back again to just where it's like a woman, my wife sleeps with me only, right? And my daughter sleeps with no one. So I mean, basically that's they all So one time I read an article. It was in a area in Cameroon where daughter came home and she was bleeding, and the father thought she got a cherry pop and beat her because of that. Because in his mind it was like, who else is gonna? This bleeding's only coming from one thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that goes to the point of like thinking that a man is thinking, you know, or most men who are maybe more dominant in or chauvinistic, like, well, if I'm not touching you and you're not supposed to be touched by anyone, where is this coming from? You know, versus with us understanding. And I think it goes back to exactly what you said. Your menstrual cycle is directly connected to your sexuality. I don't think you can separate the two. Even when we begin to talk to our sons about things, there has to become the topic of sexuality. And I think, honestly, it can be done at younger ages. It's just about how you present it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just about the fact of like knowing that, because I think there's nothing more empowering than a man and a woman understanding their body, understanding why they're feeling what they're feeling. I don't know, you guys can talk about, but are there, you know, sometimes mood swings that come with things. Sometimes
So now you
Wait.
make that noise.
No.
So that is the joke. But see, that is
it's the
honestly. So if you think about as a woman in business,
Yes.
when you get upset with an employee and you have to correct them, you're
It's
being
not
the
your
manager. You're she's on the rag. That's something that we deal with all the time as being in business, and that's, you know, sometimes that stigma. I mean,
follows through.
It's rough.
It's real.
Like,
I get way more like, I would say, like I know when that time is coming, because things really, like, I can cry so much easier.
Yeah, sure.
Crying is like,
My wife does it all the time.
And I think that's where, you know, us men, because we have this testosterone, we're like constantly boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
You know, we're not as, or let's say, learn as in tune.
We're not as in tune.
You
To the
know,
emotional
to the
swing.
emotional swing that
women
brings,
deal with.
you know, because, you know, we're dealing with
I
some
challenge that a little bit, Erica. Are you back me up on the challenge of that? I feel like, you know, men, it's not maybe as like clockwork or regular, but men they go through like they go through like
The time of-
periods where it's almost like
Listen,
y'all are having your own
your
day.
time of
I mean, I need to run to the store for you, but it's your time.
I agree, but I think it's not the hormonal imbalance. I think what we're saying chemically, during your cycle, when you have more, whether it's progesterone or your estrogens that are secreted more around when you are menstruating, I think there are emotional variations that goes on with women at that time that men are not so competent of catering to that and being reasonable.
Yeah.
So we just feel like, y'all, you know, everything
is off, man.
we just-
And because it happens so like
right.
every like
Yeah.
like we're on it, like literally it goes like because you last what, like 4 to 5 days, maybe 6 some, you know, if you're a regular, because
and that's the thing too, because
regular-
some, you know, it's like you have somebody who's
being
like
a
4
regular,
days, somebody who's like 6 days,
yeah.
and it can last. So for me, you know, I guess with you, it's more like understanding, like, she's helped me to understand what a woman's cycle truly is. Because again, like most men, for me, it's like, I cannot have sex with you. That's usually the period signifies like, oh, this
That's
is,
about all it.
that's about
kind of all it
that's
really
what
about.
us,
Okay,
you know, to be frank, that's what men see is like,
Yeah.
oh,
Okay.
no sex. It's closed. The store's closed, right? But there's so much more to
There's
it.
so much
You know,
more
and
to
I
it.
think that's, you know, again, there is purpose to it. So I would say the women that are on this panel and others that are watching, what is the purpose?
What is the purpose behind period? Well, the purpose, I believe, behind a woman's period speaks for that the woman's body is doing something that is beautiful. in a sense, it is it's really, if you think about it, your period is your ovary shedding. And if your ovary sheds, that's where the blood is coming from. If you do not have your period, that means that ovary is being fertilized and, well, on a regular basis. Let me be frank, because I know there are women that struggle with a lot of menstruation, which leads to a lot of infertility, which can be a very emotional journey on its own. Because when you are not menstruating regularly and you desire to be a mother, that makes it more complicated and more difficult. So I think the purpose really behind is that there is something beautiful that happens, whether it is with having your period or not. But I think more importantly, the purpose is really what we're doing right now, is giving that full conversation of sexuality, a woman's body, what cultural perspectives, bringing to light, because many things that we are talking about here are literally, when you think about trying to help someone who doesn't have the resources that we have. So we can go to Target and buy pads, and even though it's embarrassing for us, it's right there for us.
Mhm.
But the woman that doesn't even have access to that, and then she's using something that's dirty and foreign and using leaves to absorb that blood. I think about like how she deals with that over and over again every continually, and how that wears on her. Because Rich can tell you, like, when I'm on my period, I always just feel like, yeah, like I'm taking morning showers after, like I'm like, and there's a constant like thing that happens when you're on your period, because you're conscious of, are you giving off an odor? Are you need to go change your pad? So when you don't have access to that, how much the purpose is, how the unveiling, like how much deeper is that for her and how she feels.
That's good. My wife ran a OBGYN clinic, and she would tell me stories about how, young girls or some women would, when they would use the, I don't know which one is which, the tampon.
The same.
The stick. I call it the stick. I call it the stick, right?
That's what it is.
It's a sticker. Right? So whenever but the time when they would come in, because either they forgot or put another one in and didn't remember that it was in there, and she would talk about, and I never imagined it. She would talk about the stench of all of the bacteria that's being soaked up into this object that's out of a woman.
Yeah.
And having to come into an office, and she would say that the office would be, the whole office would be reeking.
Yes.
But that's someone, that's an embarrassment, I would imagine, right?
Yes.
So,
Even as an adult.
if you have to come in, you have to have someone help you figure out, and you don't remember that you put one in there, as an example. And so I think the purpose also for, as a, just that awareness around sensitivity towards a subject many people don't want to talk about, and just the sensitivity for men. I always try to track my wife's cycle, because I always want to try to prepare myself emotionally for the roller coaster ride that I'm about to be on. And she'll catch me off guard one day, and I'll flip out. I'll catch myself on. I'm sorry, but if we really want to be available to our wives, men, and to our daughters, we have to pay closer attention to the ebbs and flows of their cycle and the emotional roller coaster ride that they're on. They don't want to necessarily flip out on, I would imagine. They don't want to flip out. No. So the purpose is this awareness that we can kind of embark on others, say, let's do this together. You don't have to be alone in this. That as men, we can support you.
Yeah.
Not necessarily having to go to the store. I support you another way. But we can support you in this journey, because it can't possibly be one that you guys, take on with just,
So I think it's a complicated thing with, to go back to like our original story and finding out. I do remember, when it was like talked about, like, oh, so and so got it. It was, I remember being one of the last girls, like in my class, and it was just kind of like, when am I going to get it?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Go with me.
So I think about, for guys, like, I'm not really sure what the specific thing, but like going from like, you're a boy to like, I'm a man kind of thing, that was like the thing for you.
Yeah.
Like, you're just a little girl, you know what I mean? Versus
So it's
like
a
the
rite of
growing.
passage.
It
Yeah.
really was.
And
So
it is a rite of passage.
it is. And, and then on the flip side, to go back to what the purpose is, period, and it's when you're in that relationship, when you're married or you're with a partner and, you want planned children and things like that. When you think about that, it's your body preparing your womb, and so kids here someday, maybe, like, that's a beautiful thing. Awesome. And so like, that's really what the building up of, your uterus is preparing your womb for having a child. So, also, for those Christians out there, it also was, that was our plight. So we done messed up, and God said, there you go.
Oh man, well I want to give you credit, because I'll say when we decided to begin training women, right, with how to make reusable pads, I said to him, babe, I want to actually buy reusable pads so that I can kind of fill this thing out. Like, if we're going to be training, women on how to make them, I want to, purchase them and use them so that there can be a first-hand experience. And I love them. I do. But I think that it also comes with a certain comfort level, because I have to wash them. And so when I wash them, guess what's hanging in our bathroom?
And I imagine even the washing. I think, going back to, so many people that try to use the cloth diapers. Babies, like, well, last
you. That's what my parents did.
Like, I'm buying the
Pampers.
I know that's
similar.
so much cheap.
You gotta wash
for the environment.
The thing
I'll buy
is
the
that
Pampers.
the Pampers was what were available for us.
Okay.
So we did not have that choice.
Okay.
I came from a rural area. Even people in urban areas, I mean, it was limited. We had to wash. They had to do the thing, wash it, put those packs on.
Absolutely.
After we poop on it, they get it out, clean it back, and because that's what was available. Even if the Pampers were available, they were too expensive for the household income for able to be able to change that on every time I pooped or peed.
Yeah.
So that was challenging. I think, Erica, one thing you talked about earlier was the TTS, is the toxic shock syndrome. I think that, it would be something that it would be good for you to throw more light on. And, as my brother here mentioned, people come into, the office for checkup with that going on. I can only imagine what would happen in the Cameroon or in Kenya, in areas where they actually even use sometimes, unclean pads that have already infested bacteria on them, and then they end up with infections and things that goes untreated that can lead to. So maybe that's really good for us to talk more on that.
You brought up an excellent point, and this is something that we're still developing with our program coordinator Nancy, as we talk about, how we are providing the proper resources to women. One of the major ones is soap, and we think about supporting the women's health and hygiene program. Those donations not just go towards the fabric for the pad, but it also goes towards the products that are needed to teach the proper hygiene. So there is a combination of training and teaching of proper hygiene because there is a high risk of women with yeast infections and other things that have happened because when you don't understand how to take care of yourself in that place, the bacteria can grow.
Yeah.
If you are in certain things, and that's why we made the stance to do reusable pads because we just weren't fully comfortable in the beginning. I know some organizations use cups. I don't know if you guys heard of the cups, the menstrual cups. It's like a little plastic.
Can't say
I have
So-
the benefit of learning through her, but I was like,
Actually
no idea
learned
what is a
was
cup.
through
Yeah, so
Erica.
I was
did
sharing.
did not know
So
what
the
that was
menstrual
before.
cup is just like a little. It's very flexible. You stick it in your vagina and push it up and it absorbs the. But we just didn't
So it
feel.
collects it.
Yes,
Yeah.
it
Like
collects it
it collects
exactly.
water.
Yes.
It has like a mesh on it that prevents.
Yeah.
blowback.
So basically So it's very rubbery. You
Okay.
flip it up and then it absorbs in this little pocket area and then
That's
you
nice.
can dispose of it and whatever. I didn't feel comfortable, and especially with tampons too, because like I said, my first time using a tampon, I did not do it. And then I got one that was I felt like it was too big for like. Sorry, but it's the truth. Like I felt like
Well, there's
the
different
thing
sizes.
Bridget, what size? On the wrong side.
I felt this is before.
That was before you, but I still picked up the wrong side.
I felt like it just didn't fit
Yeah.
correctly, but it was
And you
really
ended up with
lack of
that.
right. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I felt like it
seriously.
just
That's a
was
terrible
lack-
feeling too.
It
it's
is.
a terrible because when you
I can
feel
imagine.
something just in here and it is very painful. It's not easy. Like you just have this sharp pain to the point where you can't even walk. And thank God I just had a friend who was like, "Girl, let me just try to get this out for you." But that, that's a whole different story. But basically, it's like the training behind that takes a whole different level of I think high level things that we just aren't comfortable dealing with because then you have to factor in those type of things. So we really just stress the hygiene part as well as the training part because the hygiene with your clean rag in your soap and then your dirty bag. So basically the girls and women, they are able to place their pad in a dirty bag and use that. So if they're not by somewhere where there's water at that time that they need to change, they have their dirty bag and can change it at another time. But most importantly, it was just like the last program that we did, it was just very almost surreal for them to feel like they washing themselves down there and feel normal about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feel normal.
Like it
about
was, I mean, in the reports that we got, it was, you would think something basic, something common, something commonplace was, for them was exciting.
Very exciting.
To be able to go through a process of this is why this is happening, and this is how we take care of it, and live with it.
Yeah.
And so when we look at a big purpose of how we all can be the ambassadors of really equipping people in the community, just the simple conversation, because it hits on so many levels. It hits on through you. I learned like literally a woman's ovulation cycle, right? Because I just thought the period is a period, but it's more like once you understand the cycle, she was like, there are moments where I cannot get pregnant. Right. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I just thought like, once the period is over, and
You can get pregnant.
but no, that's so this touches multiple levels. Hygiene, right? You said it, and I'm sure other women feel that. I've heard of it. It's like I feel dirty sometimes. I just don't feel clean enough, right? And from the men's perspective, like you were talking about, I had to get used to her whine. I'm seeing like specks of blood, like like for some reason, I don't know about you, man. Like any other blood I'm cool with, but when I see like is this period blood, I just think it's just.
I know. Why is that? I
I don't
literally
know.
tried to have this conversation and brought this up with my brother, and I'm like, you used to get nosebleeds, but like,
Yeah.
you're in the middle of Target, you get a nosebleed. Nobody, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's grabbing you a sweater. to cover your face up.
Right.
So what?
I really-
I don't know why is.
I think the vagina is
Yeah.
generally a sacred
Sacred place.
and it's just that it's private.
Yeah.
You know, and I think people are not just comfortable with that.
He's like, it's just gross.
No, I don't think it's. I don't think it's gross. And it's not that I don't believe it's a sacred place. I do believe that men have decided that they will tell women what they can and can't do with their vaginas, and so it is we have created this environment of discussion, and so I just honestly think that that's what it is. I think that men have controlled the narrative for so long around the female, around the woman's body, that those things are taboo because we have made them taboo. Because they shouldn't be. They're a normal function of the human body. But until someone labels it, once we label it, then that's what it is. So once it was labeled disgusting, then it became disgusting.
I think it comes from how, generally everything is how, from our experiences, right? How we were introduced to it, how did our parents, they didn't want to talk about it. It was kind of like, so from there, you culture that thing that just feel like it's something that you should not be comfortable with. So growing up and everything with the experience that you've had with it just builds that up, right? And makes it feel like it's not something. But I think what we're doing now is changing that narrative. And so we just need to be able to expand this, and if more people talk about it. And we asked earlier, what is the best time talking about it? I think we missed that part, but we need to find a comfortable time to start talking about what kids with this. And is this something that maybe even schools should start introducing and having these conversations at some point with a certain group, I don't know, middle school or what, where they will have the school nurse or whoever is in the better position to start educating them about it, start talking about it, so that this becomes a normal thing rather than something that's a taboo or feels like something that is so secret and should only be talked behind closed doors, or only when it happens, then the child runs to you and be like, okay, this happened, what's going on? What's going on with me? Because most of the time they have no idea. And then they're scared, they don't know what's going on at that point before we start addressing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think those points made a very prevalent as it really starts with, I think, again, maturity has to do with it as well. An immature mind cannot handle it. I think the more mature we get, and I've had to mature, grow in maturity to accept what that, I would say 15 years ago for me, it was just, this is what it is. But now I understand the deeper meaning of what this is, and understand the beauty of it too. There's that beauty of it, that something unique that we're able to experience. Now, I don't know if that's a good experience or not, but from a biological perspective, that is something that gives women a very unique position where the mature man respects that, right? Yes. And we submit, maybe not all men, but I know for these men sitting here, like, we submit to
that process,
assist her during that period. Like, period. like assist in those needs. Because I know when there's that time, she's gonna be in a space where she may not be able to handle everything. But then on the flip side, what am I doing to help? And sometimes it may just be, for her, she just likes the intimate moments, just holding her. right? Like, how can I basically fill her up in the moments where she may not feel the best, in the moments where she feels pain, when she feels hurt, in the moments where, and that's like a good thing. So for men, it's a level of how can we mature to um, be there for the women, because she is right. I do have nieces, right? 3 boys, but I have the nieces in the family where mommy and daddy may not be around. I always say if you come to the overs, just don't get a period. But if that happens, thank God she's there. But if I'm home, then, how can I rise up to make her still feel beautiful? Because, we always look at that girl child, that little child, that girl who's still, because again, it's that whole peer pressure thing and this, friends look at you one way and think that because you're going this, you are unworthy, you are not beautiful, you're not good enough, but still, how do we speak life into the woman? And I'm sure there are women who, during that time frame, they lose all sense of worth sometimes.
Yeah. For sometimes a menstrual cycle can be that's why it goes back to what I initially said. There is a physical component, but I think there is an emotional, way deeper emotional component that is associated with this. You agree, Jane?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, you've got the biological stuff that's going on. So you've got the hormones and things like that you don't really, have any control over and things like that. And then also, I honestly think it's a lot of the difference between the indoor and the outdoor plumbing. So, it's like,
outdoor plumbing.
no?
Yeah, I got it.
Wait,
Okay.
I just,
See, I
He's like,
I got it now. I got it. Took me a while.
okay.
Okay.
So, like, the maintenance on the equipment is so much
Now I
more
get
in depth, like with the indoor.
That is true. Outdoors easy to
So
maintain. Gotcha.
so easy, just
Stick a pipe out, cut it, you're good. But indoor, you got to go through grass, ground.
there's a lot going on there.
I got
It's a lot.
Got
Yeah, it is.
No,
Get rich just getting educated.
no.
I think a couple of audience just got
It
confused.
took me a while. I like indoor, outdoor plumbing, but now this is a conversation that I really think can go on for a long time. We literally just hit over an hour. We'll wrap up just by, I guess, looking at closing thoughts on this. Everybody, and if it's, what's the takeaway and what is the, not necessarily like a big call to action for those who are watching or listening, but really more like, let's just, I guess, this conversation, how has that impacted you? Let's just keep it amongst us, and then hopefully that inspires somebody else who is watching.
Well, I think it's impacted me because we talk about, how what we do at Generosity Global, we make it personal to us. And I agree when there is the issue of homelessness, the issue of lack of clean water, the issue of any inhumane condition that a human must have to experience or be exposed to, if ever that issue is personalized and tugs at your heart and just takes you where you have to figure out how can I be a solution in this thing. I believe that makes it that much of a deeper and more impactful mission because it's personal. You now see yourself as the woman or the young girl that also has shared this, not the same experiences, but the same feelings. So for me, I look at this and say, it's a personal matter for me because the young girl child or the woman in Cameroon or Kenya or even just in remote places in Africa, Yes, I was blessed to experience a more privileged life, but to hear that everyone here has shared a type of struggle in dealing with this, it connects the two. It connects the girl child in Kenya over here, and like personal, you're like, wow, there's a connection that's taking place. There's an emotional experience that we experience, and although we are miles apart, I feel it. And I believe that when two people or more feel the same thing, the one that can take action, one that's in the position to change, the one that's in position to impact must do. So I think that these conversations are necessary because we have been privileged and blessed to be in this situation where we not only feel it, but now we can take action upon it. We can move. We can now go into different places and encourage and uplift that young woman, and not just the women doing it, the men too. And just think how much beauty, like how beauty, talk about purpose behind something, the beauty behind that when men and women are coming together and that woman feels valued. That woman who once felt, I felt unseen, I felt unheard. For days, I didn't even go near my husband. I had to sleep outside or had to sleep away because he didn't want to smell me. You know, the nights or the days that I had to walk miles on my period, and you know that first day of your period is just not fun. I don't care how long you're on your period, that very first day is the worst. And that woman who's on her period in that very early time and walking miles and then using that dirty water to only breathe the bacteria that it all up. It's just it tugs. So when it tugs, it's like how empowering can we be now to create a space, a safe haven where they can express their feelings, express how they feel, but now we have collectively galvanized a solution, and now they feel valued and they feel seen, and I think that's all worth it. You know, it's the purpose behind it for me.
I agree with everything you said, but also I think one thing that I didn't really anticipate kind of coming to light for me in the conversation with everyone as we, talked about when do you start having that conversation, or, why is there kind of the stigma? I thought you brought up some really uh, points that, want to think about, yeah, some more actually, just about like the male of like just how maybe that narrative has been controlled, and that's kind of where we got. So I almost was a little introspective with myself, there for a little bit about how I, as a woman, have been with my daughter, and how what that looks like, or even how you have talked to your friends about how to. I've not had those conversations with my son. So I think for anybody watching right now, to even just on that base level, these are not conversations that are had. So you don't even really think about this stuff until you start having the conversation. So, but then yes, also everything you said as far as finding that connection with another human anywhere on the planet, and having those connections and being able to feel that empathy, and knowing what your own story was, and then looking at what that what that story looks like for somebody else, is a pretty awesome thing. So
Yeah. And that was a great perspective.
Yeah.
That caused me to think too. I'm like, have we
I'm still kind of
been
thinking
feeling this way? Because
yeah.
most of the, like majority of the times, the male has taken that headship in this sense. So very, very.
Yeah, I think a big thing for me has always been just the shame piece. So shame is just so deep rooted in any human, and whenever you're made to feel beautiful and empowered, and you're educated, and like in your value, it just it can transcend you. And so I think having this conversation, I remember college, I was in a sexuality class, and like the first exercise we did was we said the F word 5 times in a row. Like we said all these like like bad like words or whatever, but it was like to desensitize, make this an open space to like be able to talk about things that are like raw and like human, and to be able to like not be embarrassed or like shame, and like I just don't think there's enough of that, and the space to feel safe to do so because of the narrative that's been so controlled. And I just I feel more empowered today knowing that like there's men here that's gonna empower more men, and be advocates for the other people in their lives. So yeah, this has been a real pleasure, and like those who've been watching too, like I'm truly
We actually
blessed.
have some good viewership. I mean, we had people chiming in. Linda says there are also other underlying factors to menstrual periods, such as uterine fibroids, which are more prevalent in minority and underserved communities. With lack of education, these women simply say they have painful periods without knowing what the root causes are. Sophie, yes, it's refreshing to know that though I had the privilege of having sisters here to see me through my first experience, I shift my mind to educate others, specifically when I go back to my village, start the conversation and education. I remember my home visit, I offered a cousin a tampon, and they were afraid to use because to them it means they lost their virginity. So each time I go, I simply bring boxes of pads. It's why education and creating awareness is so important.
You see, that right there
those
is
two, wow, very good comments. Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so man, this has been really interesting for me. First of all, because of background, the lack of this conversation within a household. So for me, it's that barrier that has been put in front of this, and particularly the shame factor or the feel that we cannot have this conversation because it seems like sensitizing our kids is putting them or telling them to harm's way, which is completely with the opposite. So I really think that this is a better way to open up and have these conversations with our children. I think we can find a reasonable age where we feel this is the age where they start experiencing these type of things, and really open up to making it comfortable with them, not being reactive but being proactive. What do I mean by that? If we let them find out before we start talking, they might, they end up talking to the wrong people. But if you talk to them about it, they're better prepared. They see it happen, then they already know, oh, only talk to me about this. So me, my background as a healthcare personnel, I think I'm comfortable talking to my daughters about this, and I'm going to wait for my wife to, because I have a close relationship with my girls. I'm going to have the conversation when I feel the time and the need is for me to have that conversation, and so they feel more comfortable, coming to me, to their mother, whatsoever. But I feel that men really need to take this on themselves as well, because I think that barrier, as you said, is so enshrined in men, and men have the narrative for men has been completely different. So if we are more open to this within our communities, talking to and like you said, so that men that are reasonable and responsible will take this easily. So this has been eye-opening, and to throw more light on what Sophie and Linda said. There's so much lack of education within the third world countries like in Cameroon, where it's like that you suffered from, or uterine fibroid, dysmenorrhea, and all these other things that is ongoing with your menstrual cycle. They're so less informed. So I believe these GG women will empower this point, and it will really help change a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has actually been great for me. Again, I have a son, but I have four daughters. And one of the things that we try to do, so culture dictates behavior, right? So based on whatever culture you're a part of, you kind of move in that vein, and you don't go outside that culture. So if it's important enough, then the decision has to be made that I will no longer function within this the confines of this particular cultural norm. I have to do something different. And so with it was beautiful that the sister just put in, or the person just put in, that they don't take a tampon because they believe that they lose their virginity. Those are things that are being taught, and they're typically being taught. And you talk about hundreds of years of being educated in a particular way. So the challenge is always to get people to think outside of the norm. So when Generosity Global decides to show up in Kenya or show up in Cameroon, show up with this information, these tools to say, hey, we understand your culture, but here's how we can accommodate you and to provide for you the things that we absolutely know that you need. And that's what this really allowed me to see. And I say, Rich and Eric, I've always, since the first mission ball I was invited to years ago, I told you that I was going to ride with you because it tugged at your heartstrings, right? The things when you can put yourself in a position to identify with the struggle, not as a man, but as a man with daughters, and to know when my oldest is in pain because of her cycle, you know, and she's in pain, you know, she doesn't want to come out of a room, and you're helpless as a parent, you know, there's nothing you can do, right? You know, give her an Advil or a Motrin, and, you know, hopefully she comes out the room in a couple of days, you know, feel okay to actually, you know, participate, you know, with the family. And so I love what you guys have been doing and continue to do, and just to be able to move into a space where these young women and these women have a need, and then we can help kind of fulfill that need. We can do something, and if more of us decided to do something, then we would be in a much better place.
Absolutely.
That's good. Just a final comment from Linda, teaching both men and women to understand how the menstrual cycle works. Also very essential in family planning. You know, so coming into this, it was just, you know, like, what do I say, right? How do we have this conversation? Because again, I've never had a conversation about this except for my wife. Conversation leads to comprehension, and leads to awareness. I believe that for me, the opportunity to talk about this outside and be comfortable talking about it in a mature way, where it is understanding that there's a global connection here. The woman in America goes through the same thing as the woman in a developing country. The feeling of isolation, the feeling of being shunned, the feeling of being embarrassed, the feeling of being bullied, the lack of conversation with a parent, somebody who should be the one to basically pass on the baton for you to say, take it and run with it confidently. All that is because the conversation is not happening, you know, profusely. So for me and for us is how can our goal, our mission is not just do the work, but really build conversation around it. Because the more we can, you know, the more we can work on the narrative and, you know, present that narrative as a viable narrative for people to, you know, look at, the more lives get transformed. The more lives, you know, there's always this domino effect. I believe you start talking about one thing, and we always talk about that may be a centerpiece where healing takes place, maybe a broken relationship, maybe whatever the case may be. I believe conversation leads to comprehension and allows for society to become better. More we can talk about things, and sometimes maybe this topic is one of those easy topics where we can always like it is, but it's like we may have differences in opinions, but the conversation needs to stay is, that purpose of that conversation. So my takeaway and just my is just the opportunity to learn the different perspectives and just learn from other than her, like from other women, like what this has been and what this is for you. And hopefully even with our viewers, just seeing what they're able to put in and learn that this is definitely something that can link men and women, and we can join hands and just work on it. So it's been an hour 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's been great.
It's been great.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you,
gonna keep
everyone.
everybody in too long,
Thank
but
you. Thank you.
definitely
so much.
for everybody who's watching, we just want to thank you all so much for just supporting Generosity Global, supporting the mission to uplift women through menstrual hygiene education and everything. We will remind you, definitely, you see the t-shirt, I'm going to put the glove right there.
Yeah.
There is purpose in it.
Period.
The website is www.generosityglobal.org/store. Please go on that website and purchase a shirt or two. What that does is it enables us to continue not only the conversation but also continue to be able to keep our team members over in Kenya employed, able to help us buy resources. We have some very big goals for Kenya as it pertains to generosity and what we can do. But just to keep this conversation going, I believe that the more we can talk about it, the more we can share in that connection, the more we can impact. So thank you all so much for watching.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much, and to our esteemed panel.
This was great.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
And as we always say, we are Generosity
Generosity
Global.
Global.
Let's go.
Yeah.